Ambassador Kethvar's scales rippled with anxiety as he approached the sealed chamber deep within the Galactic Council's most secure facility. The massive door before him bore warnings in 17 different languages, each one more emphatic than the last about the dangers that lay beyond. At the center, burned into the metal itself, was a simple symbol that had become the stuff of nightmares across the galaxy, the outline of a small blue planet with a single moon. "Are you certain about this?" asked Dr. Yilnara, her crystalline form flickering with nervous energy. The last time someone accessed the Earthgate archives, 3 senators had complete mental breakdowns just from reading the reports. Kethvar's 4 eyes focused on the biometric scanner. "The hegemony is mobilizing. They think the stories are exaggerated, that we sealed Earth out of jealousy rather than terror. Someone needs to remind the Council why we made that decision 50 years ago." The scanner accepted his credentials with a reluctant beep. Heavy locks disengaged and the door slid open with a pneumatic hiss that sounded disturbingly like a dying breath. Inside, holographic displays showed the last known images of Earth, a world that looked deceptively peaceful from orbit. "Computer, display archive file Alpha 7, first contact with species designation human," Kethvar commanded. The room filled with the ghostly blue projection of Captain Mortek, the first Galactic Council representative to make contact with humanity. Even in death recorded 50 years prior, the Zeltharian's expression conveyed a mixture of awe and absolute terror. "Personal log, standard date 2847.3. The recording began. "We arrived expecting to find a typical pre-FTL civilization. Our xenoarchaeologists had classified them as moderately aggressive based on their history of warfare. We were inadequately prepared." Dr. Yilnara's light dimmed as the captain's report continued. "First contact occurred with what they call their United Nations. Peaceful enough. They welcomed us with curiosity rather than hostility. We thought we'd found the rare exception, a species that had overcome its violent nature. We were so very wrong." The projection shifted to show surveillance footage from those early diplomatic meetings. Humans in strange cloth coverings sat across from various alien dignitaries, smiling with those unsettling rows of white bone teeth. They looked so harmless. "The revelation came during what they called a cultural exchange," Captain Mortek's voice trembled. "They wanted to show us their entertainment, their stories. We expected perhaps music or artistic displays. Instead, they showed us their movies." Kethvar had seen this footage before, but it still made his blood run cold. The recording showed a human technician cheerfully loading what they called a film into a projection device. "They started with something they claimed was for children," the captain continued. "A tale about something called Home Alone. We watched in growing horror as a juvenile human systematically tortured adult intruders using improvised weapons and elaborate traps. The humans in attendance were laughing." Dr. Yilnara's crystalline form began to vibrate with distress. Surely that was an anomaly. The recording answered her question. "We asked for something more representative of their culture. They showed us Die Hard, then John Wick, then something called Mad Max. Each one more horrifying than the last. These weren't historical documents. They were entertainment, fiction created for pleasure." The hologram displayed clips from the mentioned films. Alien Council members had documented their reactions. Entire diplomatic corps fleeing screening rooms. Ambassadors requiring psychological treatment. 3 species immediately recalling their representatives and sealing their borders. But the true horror, Captain Mortek's voice dropped to a whisper, came when we asked about their military capabilities. They showed us documentaries, real footage, something called D-Day, the Battle of Stalingrad. They had turned their entire planet into a weapons testing ground and called it history. Kethvar paused the recording. In the silence, he could hear Dr. Yilnara's systems struggling to process what she'd witnessed. "The final straw," he said quietly, "came when humanity offered to help with the Krexeling rebellion." The mention of that name made Dr. Yilnara's light flicker. The Krexeling had been a seemingly unstoppable force of destruction, consuming world after world with their biomechanical armies. The Galactic Council had been on the verge of collapse. Computer, display the Battle of Proxima Centauri. The hologram shifted to show grainy footage from the battle. A single human fleet, tiny by galactic standards, engaged the massive Krexling swarm. What followed defied every principle of civilized warfare. The humans didn't just fight the Krexling. They studied them, adapted to them. Then they did something no other species had even considered. They began to enjoy it. Watch the communication logs, Kethavar instructed. Listen to their voices. The audio crackled to life. Human voices, calm and focused, coordinating the systematic dismantling of an enemy that had terrorized the galaxy for decades. But underneath the professionalism was something else. Excitement. They were having fun. The Krexling surrendered after 3 days, Kethavar said. An empire that had never known defeat, that had consumed dozens of worlds, surrendered to a species they outnumbered 50 to 1. Not because they were outgunned, but because they were terrified. Dr. Yilnara's form stabilized slightly. So, humanity saved us. Why did we seal their gate? Kethavar gestured to the final entry in the archive. Because of what came next. The humans didn't want territory or resources. They wanted something far more disturbing. The recording showed human diplomatic representatives making their final request to the Galactic Council. They wanted to be designated as the galaxy's peacekeepers. They offered to handle all future conflicts, to deal with any species that threatened galactic stability. They weren't offering to protect us, Kethavar explained. They were asking permission to play with us. The archive contained the Council's final psychological evaluation of humanity, a species so fundamentally devoted to conflict that they had turned warfare into an art form, entertainment, and ultimately a way of life. They had evolved not just to survive violence, but to thrive in it. The gate was sealed by unanimous vote, Kethavar concluded. Every species agreed. Humanity was too dangerous to integrate into galactic civilization, not because they were evil, but because they were too good at what they did. And what they did was war. Dr. Yilnara was quiet for a long moment. Finally, she spoke. The hegemony still wants to open the gate. They think 50 years of isolation might have mellowed humanity. Kethavar accessed the final file in the archive. Long-range surveillance data from Earth, collected by automated probes. The planet's surface was unrecognizable, transformed into something that defied description. Cities that moved, oceans that burned, humans who were no longer entirely human. 50 years of isolation, Kethavar said grimly, with no one to fight but themselves. Look at what they've become. The surveillance data showed impossible things, humans who had modified themselves for combat in ways that violated every known principle of biology, weapons that seemed to bend reality itself, entire continents converted into training grounds for conflicts that might never come. They've been preparing, Dr. Yilnara whispered. They've been waiting, Kethavar corrected. And if the hegemony opens that gate, they'll finally have something new to play with. He sealed the archive and began the long walk back to the council. Chambers where he would present the evidence one more time. The vote would be close, fear had a way of fading with time, and the hegemony's promises of human allies were tempting. But Kethavar remembered the last transmission received from Earth before the gate was sealed forever. A simple message from humanity's leaders, acknowledging the decision and promising to respect it. The message had ended with 4 words that still haunted him. We'll be here waiting. In the depths of space, beyond a gate that hadn't opened in 50 years, those words remained true. Humanity was still waiting, still preparing, still hoping that someone, someday, would be foolish enough to let them out to play again. The galaxy's greatest hope was that no one ever would.